Good evening, YouTube. Welcome to another episode of Crime Time with DutyRon, a retired NYPD detective. Guys, I want to say thank you for all of my Patreon supporters, my channel members, and all of the positive interactions that we get along the way here on this channel. I want to say thank you to my channel moderators and all of the people who subscribe to this community. Tonight, we're going to talk about the Orrin and Orson West case. Sincere and classic. Our boys missing December 21st out of California City, now Bakersfield, California. And I have a special guest who I will introduce in a short period of time. We have some really great stuff to talk to tonight. Polygraphs, investigations, it's all things that we are wanting answers on. We're all needing to be educated on the different aspects. And I think I've done a decent job with bringing some of the experts on to talk to you about searches with cadaver dogs, searches from the air, searches from the land, and all the different things. Hello, Mimi, J2. Thank you so much for being here. Black Rose, all of the friends piling on in. I know everybody is looking forward to this live video, and I am looking forward to it as well. Guys, we're going to cover a couple of things here tonight, and I want to thank also, too, everybody who sent in the questions on the Discord and onto the website. We're going to do our best to get to all of the questions, and I'm going to do the best that I can to try to cover all of the different aspects of a polygraph examination. Guys, my guest that I have here tonight, again, has taken he's done for me what I think is a tremendous job of documenting his work through his social media profiles. He's also an author of a series of books. His name is Michael De La Pena, and he is a retired special agent from the Federal Bureau of Investigations. 29 years of service. He spent the last 16 of his 29 years as a polygraph expert. And he's an examiner for the Boston FBI field office. I just want to take a moment here to introduce to you a really, really special fellow brother in blue on the federal level, Mr. Michael De La Pena. Thank you so much, Mike, for joining. You got to unmute your mic. And that just takes 2 seconds. There you go.
Yep.
Thank you so much for joining. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Mike, you and we spoke quite a few times about this case. Trezell and Jacqueline West reported their adoptive 2 boys missing on December 21st out of California City. And we're 90 some odd days into their disappearance. I shared with you a couple of things in regards to this case. I just wanted to, before we go into it, if you could just give the audience a little bit of your background, and I'll go full screen with you and just give them a basic overview. You've had an illustrious career with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'd like you to tell them, because I'm not really great at the intros, as you can see.
Well, thank you. As you said, I've done 16 years exclusively polygraph full-time. That's all I did. And in that time, I probably did over 2,500 exams around the country and internationally, because as a bilingual, I'm Spanish speaker. So I've been sent to Latin America many times, and I can do the polygraphs in English and Spanish. And in fact, I have worked a couple of missing children cases where I did test in this case, two nannies in Spanish to rule them out. And that's one of the great benefits of polygraph, is to rule people out.
And I'd like to also ask you quickly, too, when you do this kind of work for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, where does this work take you? Is this now nationwide, or are you going outside of the country to do some of these polygraph exams?
Well, I have traveled to Latin America extensively at the request of the embassies when we have an agreement with a foreign country. I spent 2 months in Iraq testing insurgents, they called them, during the war in 2008. And I also lecture on interview and interrogation with the FBI, or I did before I retired in December of 2019. I produced courses for the agents and new agents in particular.
Wow. That must have been interesting because you got to see all of your agents throughout the United States and throughout the world really come in to get the training. So that's awesome. Hey, I want to talk quickly before we dive into this case. What drove you to write this book series, the Coyote Wars, the Last Coyote, and Coyote Rising? This whole trilogy. What was the motivation there? Is that something that you always were interested in? And
it was, and I've always been interested in writing. I wrote for my college newspaper and my high school newspaper, and I probably would have been a writer or a journalist if I hadn't gone into the FBI. And I thought that I would love to do a book on the FBI, but I thought I'd make it a fictional book. I thought it would be easier to get permission to get it published, which is true. And I also wanted a hero in the book, or heroes that were polygraph examiners. You don't find that in most books. So I wrote it from the perspective of a polygraph examiner, and they're suspense novels.
That's fantastic. And I'm going to link down below in the description how you all can get copies of his book and purchase it on Amazon. I think it's available in Barnes and Noble and probably anywhere where you can get your local books. So probably great reads. I mean, I looked at some of your Facebook, the professional page, and there's quite a few fans out there, Michael. So kudos to you. I tip my cap. So right now I'm going to listen, and those of you, we all have seen this. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but what I want to do is kind of go over this. Michael and I have reviewed this together. I want to go over this brief. This is their only interview that they gave to the press, and then Mike and I will try to break it down a little bit, and then we're going to get right into the significance and the importance of polygraph exams and what law enforcement can and can't do with them. So this is just going to be a few minutes. I know we've seen this before, but I want to go over this so we can talk about this. So here we go, folks.
We felt so helpless, and seeing everybody out here really looking and helping out really means a lot.
So tell us what happened the night that kids went missing.
Okay.
From our yard.
It was cold. I was going to make a fire. So a lot of wood in this area right here next to our house. I opened up the back gate. I'm throwing wood, bringing it inside the house. My wife's inside. She was actually wrapping gifts, so we thought it was a good idea to got our youngest to go outside and play with chalk on the back patio. Do not let them go on the dirt in the backyard and keep them close. So I was playing with chalk, and I came to the house. I saw them there. In one house, I came back out. I didn't see them now. I immediately went back in, asked my wife, "Did you see the boys?" She said, "No, they should be outside playing with chalk." I said, "Well, I didn't see them." So I came back outside and I started searching my backyard. I searched the whole thing. I realized that I left the gate open, and I panicked, came inside the house, searched the house, me and my wife. Once that hadn't pan out, I got in the van. I looked down the street, both directions. It was getting dark, getting cold, and I got in the van and I hit a bunch of corners. I went down this street. I turned my light on. I searched. I called their names. Talked to a gentleman on the street on the other side over there. He didn't see me. So then I came home and I told my wife, we need to call the cops. It's getting dark and I need help. We got to get going. So I called the cops. Cops came. First thing they did was tell us to stay in the house so they can get a hold of us. And they had us just sitting there, and we wanted to keep searching. But everybody came out in droves. And I wanted to thank you guys that night, but we couldn't go outside.
The cops told us the best are out here.
The best are out here searching, and we appreciate it. And nobody ever could tell. We could never talk to anybody, and that was the issue.
We just want to thank everybody.
We really want to
And,
thank you guys.
please, if anybody has seen them, please call. Let somebody know.
Call the cops. Call California the City Police Department. Call them and let them know what you've seen, if you see anything. Our boys, they are going to be rambunctious, okay? They are going to be here in this area. And I really would like to go in the houses, but it's not because I want to invade people's privacy. I just want to know if make sure. That's it. Because I don't. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. If you got any questions.
Oh no, you're good.
Oh, okay.
I was just going to say, this is the first time we're hearing from you guys, and I can't imagine what you guys are going through. I can't even fathom it. For you guys, for people who are thinking that there's some kind of foul play involved, we just spoke to the biological mother. She says she had a conversation with you guys, and that she thinks there's some kind of foul play involved. That she thinks you guys did something.
And that's understandable.
What's your response to that?
That's understandable. I would think the same thing.
Yep.
I mean, that's exactly the point. And if we can find our babies, then guess what? That's no. And that's all I want is to find our babies. That's it. And I talked to her this morning, and I really wanted to tell her that I am completely sorry because we were entrusted with her children, and they came to us, and they became our children, and we named them, and they are our children, and so we want them back. So please, if y'all could get back on what you guys are doing, we should be able to get a hold of somebody. But
all right, I'm going to pause it right there, Michael, because I think we've seen enough. Let me get us back on. All right, and just a little overview there. That was the first and only time that they made an appearance. They never came out to search. With the search parties, they never came out to candlelight vigils. They never did another interview. They were never seen handing out, missing posters or anything like that. What was your take on that initially when you first saw it, and then now here again?
Well, there are several red flags strike me right away. One of the things I teach in interrogation class and a statement analysis is to look for three things when you're assessing a statement. The first is their body language. Obviously, that's the first thing you notice when a person's in the room. And in their case, that you see immediate red flags. Their arms crossed. He's looking down at the ground during the statement. He's not making eye contact with the people that they're asking questions. She's rocking back and forth. Second, you look at the content, the actual words that they're saying. It's very critical to do that. And again, I saw a a couple of key things there. If I could point those out.
Oh, absolutely. Please do. We're all just wanting to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. Well, one of the things I teach in terms of statement analysis is a guilty person will often introduce what we call extraneous information that is not relevant at all to the case at hand. And he does that 3 times at one point when he's describing the fact that the children were playing with chalk. That is completely irrelevant to the matter, but guilty people will often insert those details because that makes them think that the story has more detail than it really does, because it really is meaningless. It doesn't matter. They were outside playing, whether it was with chalk or what, it's irrelevant.
Right. And another thing too is I picked up on it right away. The adoptive mom is swaying back and forth the whole time. Now that could just be nervousness, but what was your take on that?
Well, one of the things that you're assessing in body language is there a baseline? Is she typically nervous like that? So not knowing her, not having any other basis for comparison, it could be that she's cold and she's rocking back and forth because she's cold. I see a breeze. If I want to give her the benefit of the doubt, but I don't think so. The third component to an evaluation is what we call the emotion or conviction behind the statement. Is with how much conviction is the person speaking and addressing the crowd. And in this case, I see a very flat emotional delivery, and I see very little conviction in there in what they say. And more importantly, I ask myself, what's missing from the statement?
Right.
And I find couple of key things that's missing. And at one point, no point do they mention the children's names. They call them our children. And I've seen in many cases where a person harms a family member, for example, a wife, they don't refer to the wife as Judy or Joan. They refer to them as my wife to separate themselves from that connection. And they do that in a classic example here. They talk about them as our children, not as Orrin or Orson. And that's a huge red flag for me.
Huge. And there's so many red flags. I was showing this on the screen. The news crew took it upon themselves to zoom in on his hands. Now, I don't know if that was just them just saying, wow, let's show the audience that this guy has his hands underneath his arms for 13 minutes. Now, I don't know many people who can keep their arms crossed and hands folded underneath their arms for 5 minutes, never mind 13 minutes. And that stood out to me as something kind of odd. He stood there the entire time exactly folded, just like that. No hand movements. And this conversation, as you saw, got very heated because the biological family was on the lawn and they started yelling and screaming at them like, you were supposed to take care of the kids and you guys didn't. Many people question too about their nervousness. They now look over their shoulder when a truck's coming by. I chalk that up to perhaps just, a car's coming by. You just want to see who it is. Is it more people gawking at me, or it could be something that they're nervous of. What was the rest of your take on, besides these Brazilian red flags, Michael?
Well, definitely the fact that where are the pictures of these children? Where are you? If you want to be helpful, it's not enough to just go looking. Well, who am I looking for? Why don't you have a photo or photos? And more importantly, at one point, then he's confronted by the question of the family believes there might be foul play. And in a classic response of a guilty person, the person doesn't deny. He doesn't deny that there's foul play. He literally says, "Oh, it's understandable."
And she does. Both of them do it.
That they would think that. Yeah, and in fact, that is a perfect opportunity if you're innocent to say, "No, it's not understandable. I adopted these children to protect them, and I may have failed in that, but it's not through anything I've done."
Right, and that was that amazing part of his family, his parents, the Trezells, his mother and his grandmother and grandfather, his mother and father. They do the same thing on their interview. I have that queued up. I'm not going to play it, but essentially they don't even mention the kids by name, and they don't even say we want them back. They just say that we are victims. People are parked out in front of our house with signs, "Where are the boys?" They're on bullhorns asking for answers, and they basically say we're the victims. They're harassing us, and they never mention their grandsons by name. So it's almost like a learned defense, and that's why so many people feel like the grandparents are either have knowledge about what happened to these kids and are covering for their sons, or are just how these people are. I just wanted to know what your take was on Jacqueline, on the female. We talked about Trezell quite a bit. What was your take on her behavior in this 13 minutes?
Well, looking at her, she did not want to be there. I mean, she clearly, if you look at everything, her posture, her looking away, her glancing askew and astray, and rocking about, and really not making any sense. She just, it's almost like she was forced to be there. I would almost say that she was almost like a hostage standing there. Maybe she's protecting her husband. No, I don't know. Don't want to over speculate.
Yeah, and the California City Police Chief early on in this, Michael, he came out and said, "Oh, we suspect foul play," but he goes on to say that the adoptive parents, that these two are not suspects. It brings me to the next point of polygraphs. He was questioned by a very aggressive and good news reporter, Brian Wang, 23 ABC. I've had him here on my show as a guest. Brian Wang did some really good one-on-one interviews with the California City Police. And Michael, he obviously, for investigative integrity reasons, he said, I can either confirm or deny whether these two took a polygraph, but we asked them to. As an expert polygraph technician with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, how important is it for someone who is not guilty to come forward? I spoke with Mark Class from the Class Kids Foundation. His daughter was brutally murdered and raped in 1993 in Petaluma, California. And he said to me right here on this show, the very first thing I did is told them, clear me. I'll take a polygraph. You could polygraph my whole family. And he said he wanted himself cleared so he could help search. What's the importance of anybody that's in a position like this to come forward?
Well, if you're innocent, you should embrace the polygraph. It's a very highly accurate, especially in the right hands of a properly trained examiner. I would immediately volunteer myself if my children went missing so that they could move on and pursue actual leads. If you're guilty, I would, I hate to say this, but I would run for the hills. I wouldn't want to take the polygraph because you're going to fail the exam if you are guilty. There's no doubt about that.
They've in fact lawyered up after they were asked to take the polygraph. So in your 29 years, 16 years administering polygraph exams, tell the audience, is it mandatory? Does somebody have the right to say to law enforcement, I don't want to take the polygraph? And what happens to the law enforcement and investigation after that step, after someone declines? Talk about what happens. But first, talk about whether they can be forced into taking one, and then where the investigation goes after that.
Okay. So first of all, I'd like to say that my experience with polygraph goes before I was even an examiner. So as a case agent, as a young agent, I employed polygraph in many cases, and that's one of the things that got me interested in polygraphs, is developing a rapport with the examiners when I was a much younger agent. Yeah. But in terms of a polygraph, it's a 100% a voluntary activity. Nobody can be forced to take a polygraph. Its in very nature requires the cooperation of the person sitting in the chair. Their components are attached to them. It absolutely requires their cooperation. And also, not only in the FBI, but we actually have to read them their rights prior to the polygraph, because they are constrained by the device for the period of time that they're taking the test. So even though legally it's questionable whether it's legally or constitutionally required, we Mirandize, read them their rights prior to the polygraph. And in addition, they must sign an additional consent form that states that they understand they're volunteering to take the exam. They understand that they can refuse to answer any individual question, and that they can stop the polygraph at any time. That is in our consent form. That being said, once I have them in the room, I almost always get them to sign the forms and take the test, and even the guilty ones, because they understand that if they don't take the test, they're going to move up to our list of suspects, up to the top list of suspects.
Right. It now raises the suspicion on, heck, we need to really investigate these guys fully. I want to just say there was a couple of questions in the chat, and I'm not going to get to the questions just yet. So if you're hanging around, if you're here in the chat, we will take a question and answer period at the end. So please stick around to the end. Michael, somebody said in the chat, a notorious serial killer or notorious killer passed the polygraph. Can we talk about the accuracy of polygraphs? Also, what is the dependability of a polygraph if somebody A is on under the influence of drugs and it's unbeknownst to the examiner, and B, if somebody is not of sound mind or let's just say a good pathological liar? We'll lump all these questions all into one.
It's a lot of questions.
Yeah, how does that go? We'll take them one by one.
Let's start with admissibility.
Okay.
Okay. So admissibility, the federal courts have established a standard. It's called the Frye standard, F-R-Y-E. It's from U.S. versus Frye. And essentially it says that for any scientific evidence to be admissible, it has to be agreed by a consensus in the scientific community that it's reliable and it can be replicated and so forth. And the polygraph has not reached that standard for various reasons. Okay, one of them is there's no set standard training regime or requirement across the country for examiners, and so it is not admissible. However, the results of the polygraph, and by that I mean not the actual results of the charts, but the confession. If you're able to get the confession, then you are able to introduce that confession in court. The only proviso is that the jury will not be told that it was the product of a polygraph.
Okay, so that is taking care of a lot of misconceptions. The polygraph exam itself is not admissible in court, as the California City Police Chief mentioned, and as I knew from being a law enforcement professional. Matter of fact, New York City Police Department, we never even used polygraphs. That wasn't even on the table. We didn't even have a program in place because they went straight for the kill, straight for the confession. So our detectives were so good at doing the interview and interrogation, they would rely on basically signed confessions or, spontaneous utterances and things of that nature. So that wasn't even on the table. But what Michael has just told us is that, as we saw in a very famous case, I think there's not probably a person in this chat that hasn't looked into the family murders with Chris Watts. Chris Watts killed his wife, his unborn son, and his 2 daughters in Colorado. And he was given a polygraph by the CBI. A female gave the polygraph. She was very friendly. She did her job. She befriended him, and in what some would argue in an inappropriate way. She was rubbing his shoulders, and there was a lot of contact. And for me, I had no problems with it because I know what that's about. She wanted him to be as loose and as comfortable, like they were 2 buddies. And she effectively worked him to the point where at the end of it, she told him he failed miserably, Michael, and he gave a full confession. He told a lie during that confession. He tried to blame it that his wife killed their 2 daughters. He caught her in the middle of it, and then he killed her in a rage. And then he switched the whole thing around and said, no, it was all me. But that was a classic example of what you just described here. And had that gone to trial, because he pled guilty and didn't even take it to trial, had that gone to trial, the polygraph would not have been admissible, but the confession would have, correct?
Yes. But that puts sometimes the jury in a dilemma. I was involved in one of the Boston Marathon trial spin-offs of one of the friends of the terrorist, and for 6 days after the friend failed the polygraph, and I interrogated him. I got a 2-page confession, and we went to trial on that case. And for 6 days, the jury deliberated because they didn't understand what really was, and why did I come into the picture all of a sudden and get this confession. because they don't have it in context. So, there is a drawback to the government not being able to present that.
Now, let me ask you, Mike. There are some people who talk about the accuracy of the actual polygraph. Now, again, it's not admissible in court, but how accurate would you say in a guesstimate? And now it also depends on, you have some good mechanics and bad mechanics. You got some good people who could detail your car up nice, and some leave swirl marks. I would imagine some of that comes into play.
100%.
Talk about the accuracy, and it's all about what it's all about, and percentage wise.
Okay, so let me start by saying there are 4 possible outcomes to a polygraph. 1 is the subject passes the polygraph. Number 2, the person fails the polygraph. But then there's a third element, and that is a person who comes in as inconclusive. There's not enough data to assess the person, or maybe they're on some drugs that affects their physiology, and the tracings aren't good enough for the examiner to render a decision. And fourth and finally, there's something we call a no opinion exam, which is essentially either the person starts fidgeting so much during the test that he's not cooperative, or he's engaging in some other behaviors to try to attack the test, to render it ineffective. And a person's inconclusive rate depends on their training expertise. I probably had an inconclusive rate of 3 to 4%. A typical inconclusive rate might be 10%. I think that's very high. No examiner has 0% inconclusive. And this is one of the reasons it's not admissible in court, because you do have an element of percentages of tests where we cannot render a decision.
Right. And I appreciate the honesty there. But the 3 to 4% for you is relatively low. And it has to also do with your subject, right?
Yes.
The subject that you have, the equipment that you're using, and the knowledge of the examiner, and on how tight up the person is, correct?
And also the health of the person, sadly. If a person is very obese, if they have a very bad physiology, maybe they have a very high blood pressure and things of this nature, they have trouble breathing, it could affect the results. So one of the things we do is we determine whether a person's even suitable for an exam up front, and you alluded to that in terms of drugs, alcohol, and things like that, if you want me to go into that.
Yeah, I mean, people are asking those questions, and it is a valid thing. Drugs and alcohol, always play a part in possibly getting a false negative or a false positive or a false.
Yes, but that being said, if a person comes in, it's incumbent on the professional examiner to determine if the person is even suitable for the examination going forward. So right up front, we have a checklist that we go through. Have you had anything to drink in the last 24 hours? If they're drunk coming in, if they're high coming in, they're just not suitable for the examination. We would reschedule the test.
Right.
That being said, even other things, we ask, how much sleep did you get last night? If they spent all night on a shift and then they're coming in for a polygraph without any sleep, that could render a test difficult to assess. So we might say, maybe that's not a suitable person to test at this time. The same goes with people with mental problems. I've had people that have literally walked out of the room and not tested because they're hearing voices, So this is not a person who, and the agent never sought to think about that. One of the reasons we can determine that as an examiner is we ask what medications you're on, and that's where these things come out.
Right. And these are some great points, and everybody in the chat is responding good to this. Roro, thank you so much for being here. That Michael, one of the biological family members are here in the chat. The cousin of, I believe, the biological father is here, Roro. She's a Bakersfield resident, and she's saying thank you for giving this information and giving them some knowledge on the polygraph. I wanted to ask you quickly, Mike, what type of cases are polygraphs brought into play? Is it some of the worst, or is it straight down to missing person cases like this? Give us the spectrum of what a polygraph would be requested?
Well, I've worked in almost every field of criminology with doing the polygraph, and there's almost no limit to it with the imagination of a case agent. If they want to know, for example, in a white collar crime, the person may make a plea deal and say, okay, I spent all the money. I'll take the 5-year deal in prison. Meanwhile, all the money is $20 million. I've done tests like that where I'll sit down with them and say, okay, we're going to ask you if you have any hidden money somewhere, because I might do 5 years and come back out and be, $10 million richer. So there's no limit. Terrorism cases, missing people, just drug cases, anything where you can imagine that you have a question as an agent in your case, we can bring it forward in a polygraph.
And it's also great knowledge that we learned here tonight. And thank you for this, Michael, is that this is a tool to sort of bring out a confession, so to speak, when you could use this type of examination and come at a person and say, hey, listen, we know that what you're telling us is not truthful, just like we saw in that Chris Watts case, but it's not 100%. There are some small percentages of folks that are guilty or have committed a crime that can trick you on the polygraph. But that doesn't mean that the investigation is over. That's the whole thing. This is just one piece of it, of the investigation. We do know that the FBI is involved in this case. They have been called in, I believe, by Bakersfield PD. They are the lead on this case, and they're being supplemented by FBI with their computer forensics lab and things of that nature. That's pretty much confirmed. So I wanted to ask you, I speak about this openly all the time, about the technology that's afforded to the FBI through the federal government. Speak about how tightened up the forensics lab is, and some of the, I'm sure you have knowledge of some of the investigation tactics and techniques that are used by the FBI.
Well, the FBI has probably one of the best laboratories in the world to process things. We have everything from tire marks to bomb components at the lab, and they can tell signatures of different devices, for example, that are used. There's just so many number of things that we have. And in polygraph, we also have now equipment to detect countermeasures when a person's trying to defeat the test. So I have some components that measure if a person is trying to defeat the test through movements, very subtle movements. And it's one of the ways we can detect if a person is employing countermeasures to try to, quote unquote, beat the test. And quite frankly, I don't think you can. If you are guilty, I don't think you can beat the test, and certainly not with a trained examiner.
Right. I want to get to, because we're 38 minutes. Can you believe we've been talking 38 minutes? Time goes by quickly, but I wanted to get to some of the user and some of my input from my channel members, the folks who subscribe here. I don't think there's a way I can highlight these because these are coming in from my website. Mm-hmm. Mimi J2, who is a moderator and a channel member, Mimi J2 says, would a pathological liar be able to pass a lie detector test? Thank you, Michael, for your service.
I think that's a great question. I get that question every time I do a presentation. As always, somebody raises their hand and asks that question, because the misconception is that a person who is a pathological liar can sit there without having any physiological reactions when they're lying. And that's simply not the case, because the issue isn't, are they feeling guilty over what they did? They do not. A sociopath feels no remorse at all. However, the sociopath is very concerned about the most important person in the world to them, and that is themselves. And they are concerned that they're going to be detected. And that fear of detection through the polygraph does result in a physiological reaction to relevant questions regarding the crime. So if I ask, did you rob that bank? and he robbed the bank, he's worried that he's going to go to jail. He doesn't want to go to jail. He's worried I'm going to discover that. And so there is a reaction. So it's not so much the remorsefulness of the person. That's really not there in most criminals. It's simply a fear of detection.
Very good. Thank you for that, Mike. Here's the next question. Lou in the UK says, what happens if someone is a point away from a truth or a lie? What happens then? So I think that question is basically what happens when you have somebody that's, and I think you discussed this previously. That's, I'll let you take it from there. But
okay.
So basically, the thing is, what if the person is like a point away or so from the truth or a lie? If you're somewhere in between and not knowing, I think you mentioned.
Well, one of the things we can do is we can ask the questions more times. In other words, if the person's on a bubble, we might ask it an additional time. So it's essentially a string of questions. It's not just one or two questions. It's a string of questions to get interview with a person. So if it's on the bubble, you might say, you know what, I'm going to ask it an additional time. And you go through it one more time. And if at the end of that you still don't have a conclusive result, we don't just let it go. We take a pause and we say, you know what, Johnny, we're gonna do this test all over again. And we do what's called a second series. Okay, so you want to clean that up and to render a decision one way or the other. So you would do another one, and you'd say, you know what, we're going to change the questions up. We're going to mix the questions up, and we're going to do it a different way. And often we can fix it. Awesome.
Yep, that's a great thing to know. Here also, another question, and we're going to wrap it up with the last couple of questions here. This is pretty basic. Michelle V says, my question to Michael the expert, how long does usually a polygraph test last, and who gives you the questions to ask? Very good question, Michelle.
So the questions are based on my interview with the subject. Of course, that being said, if I go, if a case agent asks me to come and help them with a missing person case, I'm going to sit with the case agent and figure out, what do you suggest? And together we'll come up with the questions. Ultimately, though, I have to be, as the polygraph examiner, the one to finally agree with the question, because polygraph is a specific tool, and it requires the questions to be very precise. So I will take input from the case agents or the cops, but at the end of the day, I have to make the final rendering of that. Very often, very few times do we have a conflict. But the polygraph itself takes, depending on the complexity of the crime. So if it's a simple armored car robbery or bank, tell me about your day, and they take an hour to half an hour, 10 minutes even. If they say nothing, I did nothing, I stepped home all day, the questions will come rather quickly, and within the hour I will have a result. Okay, that being said, after the polygraph itself is over, that's when we go into the interrogation, and the interrogation can take hours.
Oh, so no two are going to be the same. It all depends on the set of circumstances that the examiner is placed in, and also based on the answers he gets from an interview with the subject. So Dawn Marie asks about the polygraphs being admissible in court. We answered that already. Thank you, Dawn Marie, for that. Astro Haterade says, what's it like being a bilingual interpreter? Any insights you can provide without giving away too much information? Thank you, Michael.
Well, the great thing about being a bilingual examiner, in terms of when I do them in Spanish, I also did them in Arabic when I was in Iraq, and I've also done them in Chinese. I've also done them with a sign language interpreter. And when you use an interpreter, the test takes twice as long, because you have to say what you have to say, and then the interpreter has to repeat it, and then the same going back. You have to get the interpreter to explain to you what they said. So it's a much longer process. But as a bilingual person, and you ask the questions I would ask them in Spanish, and they answer in Spanish. It's quicker. It's a lot more efficient, and I believe it's a much more accurate test because there's no buffer between you.
There you go. Yes. Another question here that came in, and thank you for answering that. That was good insight right there. Lulu Bell says, could an innocent person fail a polygraph? And if so, how much percentage-wise would that be have you ever had someone who was innocent fail a polygraph?
I cannot testify to one person who failed and then turned out to be innocent. In some cases, we'll never know. They failed and we move on to other suspects. The problem is there could be cases where, for example, the person committed a similar crime that they're not being accused of, and there's what we transference over of that. So, for example, a bank teller, she might fail the test even though she had nothing to do with this bank robbery, but she's been taking money out of the till for several months, and so she feels badly about that. So you could have some transference. So it's possible that they're innocent to that particular crime, and yet somehow failed your exam. But I find it to be rare.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So there's your answer. It's rare that would happen. And he knows of none in the cases how many polygraphs have you done in your estimation over your 16 years?
Over 2,500.
2,500 polygraph exams. Wow.
As you know, I work as an independent contractor now, so I'm still running polygraphs.
Right. Yeah, you were on the road the other day. You had a 7-hour ride. Wow.
I was working two cases this week. Yeah.
This last message comes in from Roro. That's the cousin of the biological on the biological side. So she's still here, a family member. She put a message in. Thank you, DutyRon, for this live great information. And I agree with Michael. I would take one if I was innocent, so we could move forward and look for the children, focus on the real perpetrators. And that's coming from the biological family side. She is out there every day with signs, with this banner that's behind me. She sent this to me. She has those on her car, and she parks by the freeways and in shopping centers. She hands out flyers every day. She's out there. And that's what somebody would be doing if they had no foul play. They were not involved in foul play in the disappearance of these beautiful boys, 3 and 4 years old, Orrin and Orson West. So she's saying thank you for this information. And I know that, Michael, it was, you didn't even second guess this. When I messaged you and we met through a mutual friend on LinkedIn, he said, I got a guy for you. And thank you for sending him over. I think, what was the guy's name? Sam, right? Sam. I'd have to look at my LinkedIn, but I contacted him first, and then he told me to contact you. So that was a great thing. I appreciate that. Lily Bell also says, okay, I think we answered that one. I think we're good. I'm going to look into the live chat now. If anybody sent any super chats, let me say hello to everybody. Thank you for joining. If you're not subscribed to my channel, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, all one word, DutyRon. And also, please consider becoming a channel member and subscribing to this great community. I bring police perspective from law enforcement professionals. I have Michael De La Pena, a retired FBI special agent. He did 29 years in the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and 16 of his 20 years was done in the his duties were a polygraph examiner. 16 years, and he also taught the class to the new examiners coming up. To all the rookies, he handled them. Thank you for that super chat, Lou. UK, thank you so much for that. We answered one of your questions. I'm going to look to the live chat and see if there's any good questions. Let me just scroll quickly. Mike, you want to talk about your book a little bit, the book series, or what you got working on?
Sure. Well, the book series speaks for itself. If you want to follow me in my next book, by the way, you can follow me through my book Facebook page, The Coyote Wars, on Facebook. It was a great experience. I got to meet so many great people. And I only wrote the second and third books because the reception was so good for the first one. And people were asking me to please write another book. And I'm like, I actually have a job, folks. Okay. So I was doing that on my time off. So, but the next book is going to be called Confessions to the FBI, and it's going to come out hopefully within a year, and it's going to be true stories of cases that I worked on.
All right, so here is the Coyote Wars book. Is this your? Am I on the right site here, Mike? Can you see this good?
Yes, because I posted a link to your chat today. So.
Oh
yep,
yeah,
that's
there
it.
we go. So this is oh wow, look, you did post some of the stuff.
Yeah.
This was the video.
I post reviews. Yeah.
This was
There's a
before-
video about my next book. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the one that I was telling you about before we went live. So here is, oh, look at this. I gotta highlight this. Let me go full screen so everybody could see this handsome devil. Hold on. Full screen.
That's the three books there.
Yeah, these are the three books. You guys are getting a look at what the work that he's doing. I'm gonna scroll through some of these. There's Coyote Wars. These are some of your fans, right? Verified purchase.
Yeah, I post fan photos, and I have a bit of a following, so I try to post their pictures when they send them.
Yeah, that's somebody really putting work into that book. Boy, that's and here's Coyote Wars in the snow.
I like the one in the sun, and there's some fans. I go visit them. I sign their books. I go to book clubs.
I love it. I hope you don't mind me showing these, Mike.
No, that's fine. I love it.
Yeah, this is great. So you're out with some of the fans. It looks like you're at a restaurant. This looks like Aruba to me because I've been there many times, or somewhere nice. I don't know where that is. Florida?
I forget where that is. Yeah, that's Florida. I think. I post cool pictures sometimes in my travels where I'm going, and I try to come up with new places to have new books come out.
December 14th, 2016. Out there with the fans.
It's right after the first book came out. Yeah.
This is the gentleman that turned me on to you, by the way.
That is correct. That's John Prada.
John Prada. I had his name all messed up. John is going to kill me because I called him Sam.
So the book has all the characters in the book. That's my daughter. All the characters in my book are based on real people that I've worked with. So people that know me and worked with me can recognize themselves in the books, and they think that's really cool.
That is awesome. What do we got here? What are we looking at here?
It's a group of fans that invited me over for a signing.
Wow. Awesome. Great stuff. It looks like you're doing wonderful things, and you are continuing on, providing, your expertise in a private, for private companies, and maybe doing stuff, here with the book. I love that you're out there, putting out, good information. And you were talking about a new project as well, right? You're working on another.
Yep. It's a collaboration with another. It's going to be a really good variety of criminal stories. I'm going to have the biggest cases that I worked on. A lot of them were in the news. So it's going to have crime scene photos, some, which is going to be really cool because it complements the thing.
Excellent.
Newspaper clippings will be in there from the stories, and it's going to be exciting.
I'm looking forward to your stuff because I'm now following you. I followed this page. You guys can go over and follow that page. I'm going to link it all down below. You got Mary Lopez says she's ordering on Amazon ASAP. Some people asking if it's audio. Is it available in audiobook?
No, but it's on Kindle. If you want to do a Kindle, it's on Kindle. And sadly, I don't have it on audio. Not yet.
It's not available on audio, but I think if you are an Amazon Prime member, you could probably go and
I think it's free.
You could get it free. Yeah, I think I read that on your site. That's information on your site. Again, this is about the boys. Where are our boys? We want to get closure for the family. So I'm imploring everybody to share every video that's out there that is a valid, good information source. We're talking about what goes on this channel and some other crime channels that are out there. You have valid guests like Michael De La Pena on, a retired FBI special agent, 29 years of experience. I'm going to have him back on to talk about this case as it progresses, but we're going to talk also in the future about other cases that I cover. We're looking at Suzanne Morphew over in missing since Mother's Day over in Colorado. She's a 49-year-old mother who went missing on Mother's Day in 2020. Her husband has been very evasive, and I think I'd like to do a little bit of a deep dive into that case with you in the future if you'd be kind enough to grace us with your presence, Michael. You've been a tremendous asset to this 1 hour live stream as we approach the 1 hour mark. There's 800 people here watching for the whole hour. So you've had close to 1,000 folks watching. There is a tremendous amount of interest in the, in the polygraph area. So your expertise is tremendous, but you were a FBI agent and did just regular cases. What did you do in your first part of your career before you hit the polygraph?
So my first 3 years in the FBI, I was in New Haven, Connecticut, and I was assigned to fugitives, bank robberies, armored car robberies, what we called violent crimes, major offenders squad. And I transferred then to San Juan, Puerto Rico. From there, I did 5, almost 6 years there, and I worked domestic terrorism cases down there. They have a very violent, or at the time, very violent independence movement in Puerto Rico. And then when I got back to Boston in '98, I was assigned to a drug squad, so I was working narcotics, and I did that for almost 6 years. I was also undercover trained. I became trained in 1999. I went to the FBI's undercover school, where I was a certified undercover agent, where I actually was involved in that program for over 10 years, almost 15 years in the undercover arena. Yeah.
Yeah. So you did quite a bit of work.
A variety of cases.
Yeah, a wide variety of cases, and 2,500 polygraph exams is nothing to shake a leaf at. I mean, that's a great deal of work. You were a busy fella for quite a bit of time. I mean, that's a lot of work. I'm just highlighting a couple of these comments because people are just loving you, Mike, and they're appreciating you and thanking you for your service to the country and outside the country as well. You really traveled quite a bit and you took quite a bit of risk. We know the law enforcement field, federal, state, local, it's a dangerous thing. And that brings me to my next point. We had a mass shooting over in Boulder, Colorado a few days ago, and we lost a fellow brother in blue, and 9 extra folks who were in the store just shopping or working. So we live in a very, very difficult environment now. We haven't heard many mass shootings happen until the first of this year. It started ramping back up. So I want to just say a prayer quickly, prayer emojis in the chat for all of the victims, the 10 folks, including our law enforcement officer. These men and women put their lives on the line day in and day out. And it doesn't matter if you're going out to give a polygraph. It's about the uniform and about what you represent that is the difference between evil and bringing justice for families and for our great country. So the service that you provided over almost 30 years away from your family, I'm sure you missed many Thanksgivings and many Christmases, many holidays and things of that nature, just as I have. So we want to say thank you to all of our law enforcement professionals out there, retired, active, and still out there doing what you have to do for keeping our country and keeping our folks safe. So, a lot of strength and positive vibes being sent to the people of Boulder City, Colorado. Boulder, Colorado, I mean, it just breaks our heart to hear this. And thank you so much for, actually being here tonight and taking that whole hour out of a Wednesday night. I know you probably could have had other things that you had to do, but I just want to say thank you to you, Michael, for being in here. There's another message from Roro. Yes, DutyRon, where are the boys? Where are our boys? If you know something and are watching this, please say something. You can call the anonymous line. I have the anonymous tip number and the tip line attached to every single live stream that I do on Orrin and Orson West, Sincere and Classic. I always link the anonymous tip line because, Michael, you could tell the people how important it is with the public. How important is that in solving cases please let these folks know how important it is to make that call.
I mean, the police can only do so much. We need the cooperation of the people, the citizens, to step forward and to say something if they see something. It's just, without it, we really are not that effective. We really need the people's help.
Yeah, it is. I can't overemphasize the importance of that. So, folks that are outside the country, I know you guys are hurting as well. People in Australia, people in South Africa, people in the UK. There's not really a lot that you guys can do from afar, but what you can do is share the videos, put them onto your social media. The more eyes that we get on these boys, the more eyes we get on the story, the more chance we have of someone saying, hey, I heard something. Let me call this tip in. And all it is one piece that they need to crack a case open. So, again, I want to wish everybody in the chat about a lot of love and respect from my house to yours. I always like to end these live streams by saying, God bless the world, God bless the United States of America, and God bless each and every one of us here in the chat and all victims of crime throughout the world. Michael, I'm going to link all of your social media and all your stuff. Will you come back again and join us for another live stream?
100%.
Thank you so much. Mike, all the messages that are coming in, it's just overwhelming. I can't even highlight them all because it would take me an hour just to do that. Thank you, everyone, for positively engaging, the family for watching and coming on in, all of you who have given Super Chat and who have joined as channel members. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We are continuing to put the digital billboard. One of my viewers who was kind enough to donate $750 to continue the digital billboard in Lancaster, California. I sponsored it for the previous month through this channel's revenue, and she stepped up and sent me a message. I'm going to wait till she gives me permission to use. She put a donation forward to continue the digital billboard up on one of the freeways outside of Lancaster. So I thank you for used to donate and sends in super chats and all kinds of revenue that we can repurpose for the boys. Again, thank you to Mike. Don't disconnect because I want to talk to you after this being in here. Mike, any final thoughts?
No, just thank you all for participating.
Thank you, guys. Good night from New York City and Boston. Peace from everybody here at the